Chapter 13 The Vote on Superior Competence. Immediately following the last disastrous meeting with the aliens, Sinapo had circled up the charge altitude of Neronius and Extonius trailing far behind. He was looking neither to left nor right, nor up nor down. His eyes were open, but staring straight ahead, staring, unseeing, out of a mind closed down by shock. So when he arrived on the station, he was surprised to see Sarko there ahead of him, circling in Sinapo's space, hook set aggressively forward. Although it was virtually unheard of and highly unethical to communicate political matters by radio, Neronius must have done just that, radioed Sinapo's defeat for all to hear, while Sinapo, in shock, had his sensory equipment shut down. Else why would Sarko be up here already, contesting Sinapo's dominance? So indeed it had been a conspiracy, and it involved not only Sarko Neronius, but Extonius as well. Sinapo ignored Sarko, and, with his hook set aggressively forward, he winged Sarko out of the way and took up his station in a tight circle, immediately over the center of the compensator. "What's up?" Sarko said, meekly yielding the space. "You don't seem too happy." Sinapo said nothing. "What happened down there?" Sinapo asked again, putting more insistence into his voice. "You should know," Sinapo finally said. "One of your Cerebron toadies has already radioed you." "What are you talking about? No one's radioed anything, and I can't stand toadies, least of all a Cerebron." "Neronius? What about Neronius?" "Neronius coached me in pronunciation of the alien language. Does it make the poor soul a toady?" "Poor soul, my hook. He's just trying to stir up trouble between you and me. If you don't somehow relish that idea, then he was using you, Sarko, and you must be exceedingly naive." "I admit that was an elegant idea, using your second in command to advantage in our rivalry. But Sinapo, it's always been a friendly rivalry." "Neronius is striking, Sarko. And with Extonius on his side, why do you think I took 'em both with me and excluded you rather unceremoniously?" "Frankly, I didn't want to know, and you didn't appear to want to explain. So what did happen down there?" "Neronius made a wrong decision involving the aliens. I reversed him, and Extonius sided with him. It was as simple as that." "That doesn't sound like Extonius, Sinapo. Give me the details. You three have involved all the Maeostrians. Can't expect me to sit idly on the sidelines." "Extonius had you fooled as well, eh?" With that slight dig, Sinapo proceeded to describe the meeting in detail. Before the end of the long account, Sarko had rotated his hook so that it pointed passively aft, expressing silently but eloquently whose side he was on. When Sinapo finished, Sarko asked, "When are you having your caucus?" Sinapo had put off that decision until Sarko prodded him. His mind had been so paralyzed that he had not worked out a plan of action during his slow climb to the station. "1 hour from now," he replied, making a quick decision. "I hereby exercise my right as leader of the Maeostria," Sarko said, "and proclaim that caucus to be a joint gathering. The Cerebron caucus in a Maeostrian hearing. Please announce it as such to your people, and I will do the same for mine." It was a historic occasion. A joint gathering of the elite of both tribes was something that only occurred once a decade or so, if that often. In an ordinary Cerebron caucus, Sinapo would be on station, circling lazily above the center of the compensator, in a large loose circle, with the other members of the Cerebron elite flying to right and left, above and below, a wing spread apart. In the larger assembly of a joint gathering, however, the flight caucus was not compatible with clear and audible communication, so a grounded gathering was held on the high crags atop the cliff of time. A 90-meter encampment that cut across the intersection of the Plain of Serenity and the Forest of Repose, 8 kilometers to the northeast of the robot city and its node compensator. Sinapo, with his hook set forward, stood on the highest crag, while the other 10 members of the Cerebron elite stood below, facing him in a line on a slightly tilted table of flat granite. Their hooks were all set aft. Neronius stood in the middle of the line, immediately below Sinapo. Extonius stood to his right, the next in rank stood to the left of Neronius, and the other members of the Cerebron elite stood right and then left, in descending order of rank in the hierarchy. Sarko, with his hook set aft, stood on a nearby crag on Sinapo's right, with the same rock table, with his elite gathered below him in similar fashion, and within easy earshot of Sinapo. In addition to Sarko, there were 14 other members of the Mustrian elite. It had been temporarily expanded to handle the increased load imposed by construction of the huge node that compensated the weather effects of the robot city. "As you all now know," Sinapo said, opening the joint gathering, "we are in a strike situation, not only at the highest command level in the Cerebron elite, but with regard to our world in general. For in all fairness we must regard the invasion by the aliens as a strike for cohabitation of a world which we have previously regarded as strictly our own. To regard the presence of the aliens in any other fashion is not to give them their just due, for we cohabit now with many lower forms of life. The aliens may simply be another inferior species seeking peaceful coexistence. On the other hand, that may not be so. We must consider the possibility that we are seeing a superior race, and may be bargaining from a disadvantageous position, trying then to retain cohabitation rights ourselves." The Cerebron elite and the leader of the Mystria were all familiar with this philosophy of negotiation, and with the details of the discussion that had already taken place as we undertook further discussion with the aliens this morning. By this morning, however, it has come to my attention that Neronius was striking for command, so we entered this latest meeting with the aliens under slightly different circumstances. If conditions were appropriate, it behoved me to give Neronius his chance to prove competent in command, and to possibly prove superior competence in our continual striving to avoid the pitfalls that beset a governmental hierarchy described by Ptero's principle. The Cerebron caucus has been called this afternoon to judge that competence, while remembering our delicate situation with regard to our cohabitation with aliens." Sinapo then summarized the discussion with the aliens that had taken place that morning, up to the point when he had turned over control of the negotiations to Neronius. After calling upon Neronius to defend his response to the aliens' proposal, Sinapo sailed down to the table rock to stand a pace in front of Neronius, who then sidled out from behind Sinapo, and with an awkward hop and a powerful flap of his wings, arrived at the position on the topmost crag that Sinapo had just vacated. "Cerebrons, your challenge this afternoon is not just a matter of day-to-day competence of command. The matter is far larger than that. You must also judge competence in assessing and establishing the rank of Ceremonians in a galactic hierarchy that includes the invading aliens." His body language radiated confidence, even arrogance. "There are many facets of superiority of one race with respect to another, but the fact of most concern to us should be whether we are superior enough to eject the aliens from our planet. All else is the weak juice of the soft degenerate culture Sinapo would have us embrace." That summarizes the results of my cerebrations, and I responded accordingly. There is no point in subjecting you to useless rhetoric. I told the aliens that we can no longer tolerate their presence on the planet, and terminated the negotiations. Sinapo was stunned for the second time that day. The last was a brazen lie. He, Sinapo, had terminated the negotiations that morning. For Neronius to lead the caucus to believe otherwise was to presume the outcome of the forthcoming vote. Neronius paused for just a moment, then continued. "However, I did not tell the aliens how I proposed to ensure their removal. Threats merely alert the enemy and eliminate the element of surprise. But to this caucus I suggest, and strongly recommend, that we immediately remove them the way one of their number accidentally and effectively removed himself from our world, when he blindly ran into the edge of an embryotic compensator." Neronius paused for a moment, then he dramatically rotated his hook forward. "I suggest we all ship them into the black eternity that lies beyond space and time, where those two part company in the bowels of a node compensator." Neronius stood silently on the crag for a moment, and then sailed down to the table rock, and waddled back to his place in the line behind Sinapo. For a while the silence was disturbed only by Neronius, by the rustle of his wings and the soft slap of his feet against the table rock as he moved to resume his position in the line. Finally, when even those sounds were complete, the only thing to be heard was the soft sigh of excess oxygen being vented here and there among the assembly. Sinapo was appalled by the suggestion, so disconcerted he had a hard time taking it in. Finally he spoke again from his position on the table rock. "Extonius, I appoint you temporary chairman of the caucus, for the purpose of stating your position, taking other statements from any who may care to speak, and finally tallying the vote on superior competence." That was the standard statement he had to make at that point in the proceedings, and that was fortunate, for he could not have trusted himself to say anything else after Neronius had presented such a quixotic solution to the alien problem. Extonius now flew to the topmost crag. Neronius had impaled Extonius on the horns of a terrible dilemma, unless Sinapo had completely misjudged the younger Cerebron. Extonius was an opportunist, that had become clear that morning, but he was not a killer. Sinapo knew exactly what was going on through Extonius' mind, and could sympathize with him and feel his anguish, a terrible anguish his body language clearly bespoke. The flicker in his eyes, the slight flutter in his cold junction, the tight way he was hugging his wings to his body. Extonius was finished. The only way he could possibly save his position in the elite after the foolhardy position he had taken that morning was to vote for Neronius in hope that he would win. Yet he was a gentle being, and could not honorably endorse the violence recommended by Neronius. He had misjudged Neronius, and now he'd have to pay the terrible penalty for that unfortunate error. Sinapo wondered how well Extonius would handle it. He wanted to see him unbowed by defeat, wanted to feel he had not completely misjudged him. "Honorable leaders, fellow Cerebrons, fellow Ceremonians, I am placed this afternoon in an exceedingly awkward position." "Good," Sinapo thought. "That's the first promising observation I've heard from a Cerebron all day." "This morning," Extonius continued, "it was my opinion that Neronius spoke from a position of superior competence in his assessment of what should be the posture of Ceremonians if we are to ensure our proper place in the galactic hierarchy, to use his terms. It was not a decision I arrived at lightly. I have great respect for our leader, and I have never before seen him come to an erroneous judgment. He is completely right in pursuing a policy of peaceful cohabitation with all life forms on our world. But is he right in applying that same policy to any galactic species that may take a notion to inhabit our planet? How can we determine and judge the intentions of an alien species without a hearing, but on the other hand, risks our very survivals not to do so, not to prejudge? Mine was not a decision arrived at impetuously this morning. We have all been pondering the problem and updating our cerebrations with each report of the negotiations by our leader. So this morning the risk to our survival seemed overwhelming, and I favored the position of Neronius as being the more competent exercise of leadership. I shall not dwell unduly on the remarks of Neronius this afternoon, and will merely conclude by saying that I cannot, in good conscience, endorse them. They do not reflect competent leadership." His hook had remained pointed aft throughout his remarks. He hurried on then, no dramatic pauses, words tumbling out of his mouth in an effort to somehow put distance between himself and his own pronouncement. "Would anyone else care to make a statement?" he said. Sinapo was proud of Extonius, almost ready to forgive him. Extonius had stuck courageously to the position he had taken earlier that morning, and yet had denied Neronius that afternoon. Sinapo, like everyone else, was expecting any further remarks to come from the Cerebron elite before Extonius called upon him for a last statement, giving him the traditional privilege of last remark before the vote. So they were all surprised when Sarko spoke up, standing on the crag to Extonius's right. "Honorable Chairman, under ordinary circumstances, any remarks I might make to Cerebron caucus would be off record, unless I was called as an official witness, which I have not been this day. In fact, quite the contrary, the Maestrians are here because of leader privilege, which I exercised, recognizing this meeting to be of vital importance to the Neostria. This is our world as well as yours, Cerebrons, and ordinarily decisions affecting our mutual welfare are jointly arrived at by friendly discussion between the leaders of the two tribes. Today, a matter of vital concern to both tribes is unavoidably going to be decided by the exclusive vote of a Cerebron truncated caucus, without our leader being able to participate in the decision. You can understand my concerns, then, and the reason I asked to be considered an official witness in your proceedings. How say you, Chairman?" "So noted and recorded, honorable leader," Extonius confirmed. "My remarks will not be brief, yet neither am I given to excessive rhetoric. I am fortunate not to be constrained by the extraordinary position Extonius finds himself in. Quite the contrary. I feel compelled to dwell at length on Neronius's position this morning and his remarks this afternoon." As he was concluding those words, without pausing, Sarko slewed his hook around until it pointed forward. "Taking the last first, his final statements this afternoon confirm what I have long suspected. He is a paranoid psychopath with a cunning way of hiding his affliction by artful words and soothing flattery until the hook needs to be set. Then his pent-up fears and irrational solutions come bursting forth, as we witnessed in stunned silence this afternoon. If you are not stunned, Maestrians, then you need to examine your own state of mind." Extonius obviously was, and his introspection guided him correctly. Neronius had him deluded with the promise of honourable ascension until this afternoon, when all the honour evaporated in the course of an irrational grab for power. I can understand Extonius's reasoning at this morning's meeting with the aliens, but a true leader has to look deeper than Extonius did, and reason rationally, as Neronius did not, to find the ultimate solution to the problems. That solution which looks beyond immediate and easy resolution. Typically, Sinapo summed it all up quite concisely in his opening remarks this afternoon. Somehow we can always count on him. Neronius could have spared us all a lot of grief if he had just been listening and taken heed. If he had just been listening to Sinapo's daily reports these past few days and taken heed. Setting honour aside, and the honour is quite as compelling to Sinapo as the logic, to strike blindly at as Neronius recommends, is to possibly kick the toe of a giant, who then, as Sinapo suggests, may not be so willing to cohabit, and may even shuffle all Maestrians into their own version of a space-time partitioner, or, perish the thought, some even more malevolent and painful form of annihilation. To not strike blindly, but instead to try to understand the aliens, I am already impressed by their small leader, and I think I understand their intentions, is to soothe the giant under the worst of circumstances, or to help administer to a lesser species under the best of circumstances. Both are honourable directions for the Neostria. Neronius has sorely misguided you, Cerebrons. Sinapo has already shown you the way. I have merely reiterated what he has so concisely and clearly pointed out. Please do not fail him." A silence as keen as that which followed Neronius's last statement now fell upon the assembly. Extonius seemed in no hurry to break the silence. Instead, he seemed to be providing a space for the Cerebrons to ponder Sarko's remarks. Finally he said, "Are there any others who would like to make a statement?" But now he waited not at all before he said, "If not, our honourable leaders here provided the traditional last words before the vote on superior competence." "I have nothing further to add to my colleague's remarks," Sinapo said, and turned his hook until it pointed aft to accept humbly whatever the Cerebron elite might decide. Extonius took the vote by radio ballot, secret and anonymous. And thus ends the chapter, with a lovely little cliffhanger for you all. I hope you all have a good day. Sorry about the chapter being a bit late. Earlier in the chapter, Sinapo was stunned and silenced by the what Neronius said, and he used the word. Oh, what was the word? Quixotic solution. So quixotic means unrealistic or idealistic. And yeah, that was just closing remarks. Bye!